I got the invitation to go on this Armed Lutheran radio show, though. You know this guy? Have you seen this? There's two things that I would like to say that make me feel safe. Number one, the fact that there is a radio show called the Armed Lutheran Podcast somewhere in the world. That makes me feel safer.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 409. Thank you all so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. Welcome back if you are a recent listener, if you're a longtime listener, a relatively new listener, glad to have you here. If you are new, welcome aboard. Hope you will stick around and check out the back catalog, the 408 previous episodes, and come back for more next week. My apologies again for another week releasing the show late. Should have gotten this out on Sunday, just did not have a chance to do it. Worked all weekend again last weekend as I had the week before, just did not get a chance to. It's just been so busy with this project at work, and we're getting ready to move houses moving across town in a couple of weeks, and it's 3 weeks now, I guess, two and a half weeks, something like that. But we're kind of doing all of that moving prep stuff, and just did not get a chance to sit down and record the show. Today's topic is again inspired by our president, the houseplant, Joe Biden. But before we get into that, I do want to remind you that Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded. We don't have any advertising. We don't have any sponsors. We rely on the generosity of the members of the Reformation Gun Club, the people who make this show possible, whom we adore and appreciate for all that they do. If you would like to join them, there are a bunch of great people, and you get to meet a lot of them at our monthly online hangouts. People like Edwin from Round Lake Beach, Illinois, Dan from Enumclaw, Washington, Frank from Lake City, Michigan, Catherine from Casper, Wyoming, Paul from Sheridan, Wyoming, Curtis from Junction City, Kansas, Jim from Fort Wayne, Indiana, Mitch from Stockbridge, Michigan, Ron from Lexington Park, Maryland, and William from Bentonville, Arkansas. Thank you all so much for your support, and thank you to all of the members of the Reformation Gun Club. We really do appreciate you keeping the lights on for us and making it possible to do what we do. Folks, if you would like to join these awesome people, if you would like to get access to some exclusive content that we create and have released only for Gun Club members, if you would like to get some cool swag and some invitations to our online monthly hangouts, the next of which is going to have to be in the next couple of weeks before I tear the studio apart and pack everything up. Visit ReformationGunClub.com. Membership is just $36 a year. You get access to all that cool stuff, plus the satisfaction of knowing you helped make all this possible. Again, check it out, ReformationGunClub.com. So, as you probably know, unless you've not been paying any attention to the news, President Joe Biden has had a disastrous couple of weeks. He looked like a dead man at the presidential debate, and absolutely got shellacked by Donald Trump in that performance. He's got people in the media, prominent Democrats, and now members of Congress calling on him to step down. He steadfastly refused to do so, despite his obvious frailty and mental decline. He's had a few interviews where he's went out trying to prove after the debate that he just had a night off. It was just not a good night for him. He hadn't had enough rest after his overseas trips, which he had concluded 6 days prior to he spent, I think it was 6 days going into the debate, doing nothing but prepping for the debate at Camp David, and yet he blamed his international travel for basically jet lag for his performance. And anyway, he went on these interviews this past week trying to prove that debate was it was an aberration. It was a not to worry about. And those interviews went predictably badly for him. He made things worse. In fact, we now know that he is the first woman president first woman vice president to have a black president or something like that. He said in one interview, there was another where an interviewer from a radio station in Philadelphia admitted that the questions that she asked the president were provided by the Biden administration. She was subsequently fired by her radio station. But I saw an interview with the author, the journalist Douglas Murray, the other day, and he said something that had me thinking about today's topic. He said that if Joe Biden was your father, that you would take the keys to the car away from him at this point. You certainly would not be trusting him with the nuclear codes for the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. Taking the keys away is a hard thing to do. For an elderly parent, it's a difficult decision to make and to accept. I mean, these are people who have always been reliable and independent, hardworking, responsible. If it's your parents, you have these fond memories of them driving you to school and to church, to your friends' houses for sleepovers, to your sporting events, family vacations, picking you up from school, driving you to college, maybe driving to your house to babysit your own kids when you were out on date night or at work or at class. But at some point, Father Time catches up to all of us. And there comes a point where it's simply too dangerous for them to continue to drive. As we age, as you know, for those of you who are my age in the audience will know this. Those of you who are young whippersnappers who still haven't experienced any of the fun that is middle and older age, your reaction times get slower, your joints get a little stiffer, you don't process things in your surroundings as well, you don't see or hear as well or as clearly, and many times these people don't realize it either, or they do, and like Joe Biden, they're too stubborn to admit it. And that's where your loving family members need to step in and make difficult decisions. The kind of hard decisions that the Biden family apparently is steadfastly refusing to make because good old Joe is their ticket to power and wealth. So what are we talking about today? What does this have to do with anything? This isn't typically a political commentary show like some others, like Shapiro or some of the other, political talking heads. What I'm thinking about is, what about guns? At what point do you trust and continue to trust, or at what point do you stop trusting an elderly parent or family member with guns? I mean, we've all seen the stories about elderly people who are successfully using guns to defend themselves in their homes. So there's not a uniform rule here. It's not when you reach a certain age, the guns go away. And I'm certainly not talking about the state coming in and making this kinds of decision. Remember, not too long ago, the Obama administration I think it was through the VA, was trying to restrict the Second Amendment rights of veterans who had given fiduciary responsibility away to a parent, another person, to another family member. And the argument that we made at the time, and I would continue to make now, is that just because you're older and you're not wanting to keep up with the bank account and the numbers get confusing doesn't mean that you automatically should lose your gun rights. So there's not a uniform, hard, fast rule here when it comes to when do you give up the guns? When do you step in as a family member and say, it's time, maybe we do something different here? What are the signs that you should consider what are the signs that you need to see before you consider taking the guns away or stepping in? I'm not saying you just go in one day and steal your grandpop's guns. I'm talking about sort of like with the car keys. What are the signs that you need to look out for that maybe you need to sit down and have a talk with grandpop? Maybe it's the time that you visit with your kids and there's a gun or multiple guns left sitting out because they forgot to put them away. Or maybe a gun sitting in some weird place, like on a kitchen counter or the back of the toilet, because they forgot to, they set them down and forgot. Maybe it's that time when grandpa comes out to show you, because he's all excited. He bought a new gun at the gun show and he wants to show it to you. And he promptly flags everyone in the room and breaks every safety rule in showing it to you. Maybe it's the time you take your dad or your grandpa to the range and suddenly he's intractably unsafe in his gun handling. Maybe dad's or grandpa's hands are trembling uncontrollably, but he insists on carrying a gun in public. Or maybe it's that time he tried to pack a gun into his carry-on for a flight somewhere, or leaving a gun in a public place, or in the glove box of the car. Or maybe he begins to display decidedly unsafe carry practices. I mean, we've all seen the memes, the guy with the old guy with the gun tucked into his waistband, and it goes down into his back pocket, and there's a hole, and it's worn a hole into his pants pocket, and the muzzle's sticking out. Or maybe he's wearing some god-awful holster that's not safe, or he's frail but still insists on open carrying. Maybe he's had a negligent discharge. What do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts on this and to hear your stories if you have any. I don't have any yet. You've heard my story about being at the range with my dad and some of the that nuttiness, but that I don't blame on senility. That was something else entirely. You'll have to go back and listen to that story. That's a really old episode. But I'd love to hear your stories if you have any. At what point, because I think every child of an ailing or elderly parent has that moment where they go back and they say, Pop, or Mom or Grandma or Grandpa, maybe it's time that you don't drive anymore. Maybe you give up the car keys. It's just not safe, and we're worried about your safety. Guns are different, though. Do you have any stories like this? Do you have any experience? I'd love to hear it if you do, of coming to that conclusion that maybe Grandpa and the guns is probably not a good idea anymore. And if so, how do you approach it? Because like I said, guns are a different thing. It's one thing to say, Pop, for your safety, I think it's best if you don't drive anymore. And a lot of times when that happens, and when the elderly person finally agrees and comes to the same conclusion, something has happened that scared them, right? There was an incident where they almost had an accident, or, a car, they didn't even see a car that pulled out. They didn't get hurt, but it was enough to sort of jolt them into thinking about, maybe it's not a good idea if I do this anymore. But guns, like I say, it's a different thing. And there's something about, in the American psyche, about guns and gun ownership that might be even harder for someone who's grown up, especially someone who's grown up with guns, to finally admit that maybe owning a gun isn't the best idea for them. That admitting that they are not safe with a gun is something I suspect may be more difficult even than giving up the keys. So I would love to know what you think. I would love to hear your stories, your examples, if you have any. So visit our feedback page, armedlutheran.us/feedback. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this question. Maybe we'll have this as a point of discussion for our upcoming or a question to go around the table at our next online hangout. But I would love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your own anecdotes, your own examples, what you've experienced, and your thoughts on this particular kind of touchy subject. Now, there's another tough one, and it has to do with at what point you stop trusting yourself. But I'm not going to discuss that today. That is for another day. I have some thoughts on that as well. But I'll probably save that for the Reformation Gun Club as an exclusive. So remember, if you want access to all of the exclusive content that we offer to Reformation Gun Club members, please consider joining the Reformation Gun Club. It's reformationgunclub.com. Look for a link in the show notes, or for this or any of our previous episodes, or go to the website armedlutheran.us and look in the menu for Reformation Gun Club and come join us. All right, that's all I've got today. Thank you for your forbearance. Again, apologies for the late release. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will come back next week for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.